I will invite the Honorable, the Acting Deputy Governor to say prayers.
Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Legislative Assembly now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honor, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially we pray for the governor of our islands, the premier, the speaker of the Legislative Assembly, the leader of the opposition, ministers of the cabinet, ex officio members, and members of the Legislative Assembly, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsibilities, duties of our high office. All this we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace now and always. Amen.
Please be seated. Proceedings are now resumed.
Administration of oaths and affirmations.
None.
Reading by the Honourable Speaker of messages and announcements.
None.
Presentation of petitions.
None.
Presentation of papers and of reports. Cayman Islands Government Annual Human Resources Report 2016 to 2017 to be laid on the table by the Honourable Deputy Governor, ex officio member responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service.
The Honorable, the Acting Deputy Governor.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honorable House the annual HR report for the 18-month budget period ending 31st December 2017.
So ordered. Is the member speaking there too?
Thank you. With your leave, Mr. Speaker, I shall offer a brief explanation of the components of the annual HR report and will then speak to the specifics of the 2016-17 report. Mr. Speaker, the annual HR report just tabled contains key statistics and human resource trends within the civil service and the wider public service. The data covers the 18-month budget period ending 31st December 2017 as a report produced within the portfolio of the civil service. Section 1 of the report provides information on the demographics of the public service, including statutory authorities and government-owned companies, as at the 31st December 2017 as compared to previous reporting periods. Section 2 of the report provides information on the demographics of the core civil service as at 31st December 2017 and addresses a range of issues, including the size of the service and the Caymanization of the workforce at both the ministry portfolio and departmental levels. Section 3 of the report provides statistical information on a range of human resource activities such as recruitment and retention covering the fiscal period. Mr. Speaker, with regards to the annual HR report for the fiscal period, the following summary is pertinent. Both the civil service and the wider public service has experienced headcount increases. For a second year in a row, the greatest growth was seen in the Department of Education, which increased by 54 employees, reflecting the government's policy priorities to ensure our children are well poised and equipped for the future. Most other departments across the core civil service, which experienced an increase in headcount between June 16 and December 2017, saw only small increases of 5 employees or less. There was a slight decrease by December 2017 in Caymanian representation within the core civil service, which is now at 72.6%, and the wider public service. The increase in non-Caymanians within the civil service is largely attributed to hiring within 4 departments: the Department of Education Services, Police Service, Prison Service, and the Department of Children and Family Services, which combined account for 71% of all non-Caymanian hires. The continuing trend for higher representation of female employees, now at 55%, compared to male employees at 45% within the core civil service. This again may be attributed in large part to hiring within the education services. The implementation of a pay stagnation remedy for civil servants whose salaries had been frozen for numerous years as a result of austerity measures adopted by the government in 2008. Approximately half of the 1,516 employees who were eligible for increases under the second phase of the stagnation remedy, which was implemented in December 2016, had seen their salaries frozen for 7 or more years. The benefit of this policy that has been adopted and implemented is that it provides us with favorable impact on employee engagement and retention, and it helps us to remediate perceived inequalities that emerged during the period. Changes in civil service remuneration levels during the budget period has led to an increase in the average salary for civil servants of $846 per annum, rising now to be $46,575 per annum as at 31st December 2017, with the largest percentage of our employees, or 28% of them, earning between $40,000 to $49,999 in annual salary. This is the 3rd year that there's been an increase in the average salary following decreases in the preceding fiscal periods, and it shows a gradual and systematic approach to addressing remuneration challenges. The raise in the normal retirement age for the civil service in September 2016 resulted in an increase in the number of employees employed within the core civil service between ages 60 and 64. And the additional benefit has been, Mr. Speaker, that those employees have not only been given continued tenure of service, but they've also had the opportunity to re-enter the pension program and continue contributing towards their ultimate retirement. Raising the retirement age also has given us the additional benefit of allowing the government to retain valuable experienced staff, as indicated by the increase in the percentage of our workforce that is age 60 and over, which now stands at 7.5% as at December 2017. Mr. Speaker, in the 2018 financial year, we will continue to see growing emphasis on our human capital to ensure that the civil service is equipped to deliver new and existing services with pace and agility, and to deliver on our purpose of making the lives of those we serve better. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Public Service Pensions Board, 25th Anniversary Annual Report, 1992 to 2017, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Deputy Governor, ex officio member responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service.
The Honorable Acting Deputy Governor.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the annual report of the Public Service Pensions Board, the PSPB, as at the 31st December 2017.
So ordered. Is the member speaking thereto?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I shall offer a brief explanation of the annual report and will then speak to the specifics of the financial statement at 31st December 2017. Mr. Speaker, the Public Service Pensions Board celebrated its 25th anniversary last year with a number of well-received events in Grand Cayman and Cayman Brac. These events recognized and gave thanks to its pensioners, who are its core clients, and to the Cayman Islands overall, in particular paying due homage to the staff of the Public Service Pensions Board, their advisors, legal investment advisors, past and current board members, all of whom have played their part in the continued success of the Pensions Board. Of course, Mr. Speaker, none of this would have been possible without the ongoing support of the government as the principal employer and the participating statutory authorities and government-owned companies. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to advise that the Public Service Pensions Fund continues to remain in good financial health. The fund holds a diversified portfolio of bonds and equity securities that over the long term provides above average returns with minimized variability. Although the fund remains underfunded, the actuaries determined that the liability is sufficiently covered by available assets and the agreed financing plan. It should be noted that the full liability for additional defined benefit cost is borne by each respective employer, Mr. Speaker. As at the 31st of December 2017, the net assets available for benefits stood at $684.8 million, which represents an increase of $132.5 million, or 24% in net assets available for benefit from June 30th, 2016. In terms of other key financial information with respect to the PSPB for the year ended 31st December 2017, I note the additional following points. The total contributions to the pensions plan over the 18-month period is $77.6 million. Total benefits paid to participants during the time is $49.5 million. The total investment income is $116.6 million. Total operating income is $96,000. The operating and investment expense stood at $12.4 million. And the actuarial present value of accumulated plan benefits based on the actuarial valuation as at 1st of January 2017 is $624.2 million. The fund income using the assets at 31st December 2017 and the actuarial valuation of 1st of January 2017 is $60.6 million. The Auditor General's opinion, sir. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General issued an unqualified opinion on the financial position of the Public Service Pensions Board as at 31st December 2017. The Auditor General has stated that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position for the Public Service Pensions Board for the period. I would like to add, Mr. Speaker, my thanks again to the professional and dedicated team at the Public Service Pensions Board. They are continuously rising to the challenge to make the lives of those they serve better. Their primary customers, Mr. Speaker, are retired public servants. Just this week, this past Monday, the Public Service Pensions Board implemented the ex gratia pension Uplift program funded by the government and are now providing over 300 Caymanian retirees who work for 10 or more years and who are earning less than $650 in their total pension earnings with an uplift that took them to this level. This payment was made, as I said, on the 25th of June without requiring pensioners to fill out a single form, to come into their offices to make any calls. The payment was made retroactive to January 2018, thanks to the funding and legislative approval by the government. As is the normal practice, they are also assessed the impact of annual inflation, and they processed a cost of living adjustment of 1.9% for all defined benefit and defined contribution pensioners. Again, sir, retroactive, Mr. Speaker, to January 2018. They demonstrate this commitment to enhancing customer services while still delivering solid returns for their clients, public service pensioners, and the Cayman Islands government as the chief employer. We will release more information on the ex gratia pensions program very shortly for persons who have questions regarding eligibility, but I wanted to acknowledge the work which has and is being done, and I wanted to offer my hearty congratulations to that team and its board of directors for another year solid performance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions to honourable ministers and members of the Cabinet. The elected member for Newlands to ask the Honourable Minister of Health, Environment, Culture and Housing. Question number 21.
The Honourable Member, the Honourable Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask question number 21 in my name to the Honourable Minister of Health, Environment, Culture and Housing. Can the Honourable Minister say what is being done to resolve the issues surrounding the decision to stop accepting derelict vehicles at the Georgetown landfill?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the honourable member from Newlands for the question. Mr. Speaker, despite the press release issued by the Ministry and the Department of Environmental Health in October 2017, notifying the public of storage issues at the Georgetown landfill, which resulted in temporarily operating at a reduced rate of acceptance for scrap metals, there has been no stoppage in derelict vehicles into the Georgetown landfill, particularly in situations where the vehicle poses a traffic or a public health concern. Mr. Speaker, the DEH remains challenged with limited space for metals at the Georgetown landfill, admittedly, due to metal overstock. There may be periods of delay in receiving derelict vehicles and other metals. However, derelict vehicles are processed almost daily. Mr. Speaker, I have personally dealt with requests for vehicle removals. Thanks to the coordinated effort of the district representatives and DEH, problem areas are being addressed as we speak. In February 2018, the DEH cleared a portion of land at the Georgetown landfill to accommodate a batch of derelict vehicles that were removed from a vacant lot to the West Bay police station. Mr. Speaker, at the time, DEH announced that they had begun the process of reorganizing the landfill to normalize the removal of derelict vehicles, a process that was expected to occur over a 6-month period. Most recently in May, DEH removed a total of 16 tagged derelict vehicles, 13 in Georgetown, Prospect, Eastern Avenue, and Wattlers Road, and 3 in West Bay. During that recent exercise, there were other vehicle tags. Those are due to be removed. Mr. Speaker, this is to confirm that DEH has started clearing operations at the Georgetown landfill that will open up more spaces for metals, derelict vehicles. A designated area at the Georgetown landfill will allow the deliveries of derelict vehicles and metals to be made in an efficient manner. It is anticipated that the new designated metals area at the Georgetown landfill will be operational in the coming weeks. Mr. Speaker, the tire shredding project at the Georgetown landfill is expected to conclude within the next month after removal of the shredding system that was installed on a 1-acre space. DEH will use that area to process bale the stockpile metals, which will be sent off island to be recycled. Mr. Speaker, I can advise this honorable House that just yesterday we collected more derelict vehicles and are about to collect much more over the weekend and next week. Mr. Speaker, I would like to remind members of the public of the complaint hotline for DEH telephone, which is 916-4201 or 6696 or via email on dhcustomerservice@gov.ky. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister for that comprehensive answer. I'm not 100% convinced, though, that all is well. I've been receiving complaints from companies that are involved in the removal, private companies that are involved in the removal of derelict vehicles, and the complaints made to me is that they're being turned away when they show up at the gate with the vehicles. So maybe there was a period, because obviously these questions are submitted ahead of time, so maybe there was a period when it was stopped. But I'm glad to see that there's a complaint hotline that I can give them. So I'd like to thank the Minister for responding.
The member from Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister say what process does the department go through to hold persons accountable for leaving derelict vehicles? Because, Mr. Speaker, I think we all acknowledge that derelict vehicles in Cayman is becoming a growing problem, and if it's a growing problem, it's a growing cost to the taxpayers of this country. And persons in our community continue to think it's okay to just leave vehicles around. Now, I've had this in my constituency as a matter and an issue, and though I understand the department is having a problem, I would like to know if there is a mechanism of identifying persons who own these vehicles, and what is the enforcement process that they're going through to hold them accountable for the cost to take them away. And if there isn't, does the Minister and his department have a plan to put something of such nature in place? Because
Okay, that's your question. I think you should stop there.
sorry, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Minister.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I would like the member from Georgetown Central to repeat the question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the department have a process to identify persons responsible for these derelict vehicles as a matter of cost? If not, does the department intend to put such process in place so it does not become a burden on the state and the taxpayers of this country?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what I can tell this honorable House is that the long-term plan to deal with derelict vehicles will be under the new integrated solid waste management system, where an end-of-life metals facility will be provided in which incoming loads will be processed and shipped off island to be recycled.
The member from East End.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in a follow-up to that, hasn't that always been the policy that it's processed and eventually sent off the island?
Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and I can advise the honorable member that this has always been, and the difference is trying to get people to enforce it, and we have undertook to ensure that this is done.
The member from East End.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm not trying to put the minister in an embarrassing situation, but it is important that these vehicles get picked up. And the question is, what is being done to ensure that derelict vehicles are removed in a timely manner, from especially roadside?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank the member for the question. And yes, it is one of those vexing things that we have to deal with. At times there are equipment failures and space restrictions, and yet we still managed to, in October 2017, we received 21. In November 2017, we received 11. In December 2017, we received 27. In January 2018, we received 27. In February 2018, we received 25. March 2018, we received 16. April 2018, we received 28. In May 2018, we received 29. And in June 2018, thus far, we received 15, a total of 199.
You have a follow-up, member from East End?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know the minister wouldn't know, but for his edification, the reason we are seeing an increase in it is because of the community police now trying to get these things out of the way, particularly in my constituency. But the problem is the law specifies a time to tag and a period to have it removed. And DH does nothing. And there is no enforcement. And I can take you to East End right now. They have been tagged for months. And nobody moves them. And nobody enforces it. And nobody supervises it. Be that as it may, Mr. Speaker, it's as a minister, what I did was put it in the papers and tell people, you have it moved by the 30th day of June, or we removing everything. If it's on government property, it's going to be pulled and bailed. I bet you they move them then, because I hired all the tow trucks to do it. Mr. Speaker, my other question is, what is the method currently employed for bailing? What methods, machine, whether it's ours still, we hiring, or what have you?
Honorable Minister.
Beg your indulgence, consult, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I agree with the member from East End, the honorable member, that the vehicles, once being tagged, are not removed in a timely manner. This is something that we've just discussed this week with the department, and they have agreed, and they know that the system is not working as intended, and this is an area that they're actually working on to try to uphold the law and the intent and the spirit of the vehicles being tagged. Other than that, Mr. Speaker, and bailing, the bailer is actually in Cayman, and the space is being cleared to start bailing here in Grand Cayman in association with the ISWIM's early works program.
The member from Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I certainly want to congratulate the minister and his ministry for what I think has been truly a job well done. The issues relevant to derelict vehicles have existed for some time, certainly since I got elected, and the issue has been peculiar to Prospect as well as our neighboring community of Red Bay, of which I collaborate with. So certainly I want to thank the minister and his team for what can clearly be stated as some positive movement to collect these vehicles and remove them from our roadways and our communities because they are unsightly. I also thank the minister for making space within the landfill in order to accommodate these vehicles, and I believe, as has already been expressed, that efforts are being made to collect any remaining vehicles and to do so on a consistent basis. But to say that I can vouch for that from the standpoint of Prospect and Red Bay in particular. I have two questions, Mr. Speaker, which I suppose I will ask individually. The first question is, if the minister or ministry can answer, and that is, has there been any feedback received from the persons who own these vehicles and have had them since removed? Has there been any feedback from those owners, positive or negative?
Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you for that question, the honorable member from Prospect. Thank you for your kind words. I can tell you that I know that you always know when something is going on. As they say, when you throw the rock, whoever squeals, that's the one got hit. And I can tell you that I've received a lot of calls over the last 2 months about vehicles that have been removed because people were storing stuff in them, and we got some precise complaints and pictures and exact locations in Prospect and different areas throughout Georgetown and West Bay, and yeah. So there have been some praises from the public in terms of us starting to show that effect. Although we have been doing it ongoing, but now it's the ones that are right near and right outside people's doors on the roadside in these developments that are really causing the stir because persons knew that it was tagged, and they did nothing to try to go to the department and try to get the tag off or anything, and just allowed it to stay there. We complain about the tags being on there too long, but actually it's a blessing for some of them who still want to try to retrieve these cars, and they leave it on there and they still don't pick it up. They still don't do what they need to do to rescue the car, or if it's a car they're trying to rescue. And I applaud the department for being so aggressive over the last couple months in trying to collect some of these derelict vehicles, because we have had our troubles, and we must admit we have had troubles in collecting the derelict vehicles, and a lot of times, sometimes when you go to collect the vehicle, there's arguments with the car owners and so forth. I've had a lot of complaints on that from the department, but the department is once they're sent out now, they don't take no for an answer. They just pick them up and haul them away, because it's very unsightly.
I would like to thank the minister for efforts made in my district, but also in my constituency, West Bay West, for tackling some of the issues there. Still some work to be done, but I want to thank them because they have done quite a bit in the entire district of West Bay. The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister give an update to the recent hiring within the department to help with the garbage collection problem that was recently announced by the Honorable Franz Manderson? And maybe give indications as to why the Deputy Governor is that on the list? That's a question. It's relevant to Mr. Speaker. I'm getting indication that that's a different question. The question in relevance to the minister is that we're talking about the collection of garbage as well as vehicles, and so a derelict vehicle is not considered garbage.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to mention and thank the honourable member from Georgetown Central for asking that question. But under Section 55 of the Constitution, that this falls under the Deputy Governor, the civil service.
The member for Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary.
As mentioned, yeah, I do have a supplementary question to the original question posed. But certainly, I think the success that has been achieved, in particular in Prospect and Red Bay, comes in part by, again, excellent collaboration between ourselves and the Ministry of Environment. But I think likewise the community policing and proactive MLA representation. But as a supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, is there a process whereby owners can reclaim their property, albeit perhaps for a fee, in order to mitigate some of the costs related to collection in the first place, as I think was raised by the honourable member from Georgetown Central?
Honourable Minister. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I know I was told that you need to write into the department and you would have to do it swiftly once you found out that your vehicle has been removed. I don't have the entire answer here, and I undertake to write to the member from Prospect and in its entirety.
Next question, please.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to draw to your attention that we're past 11 o'clock.
We're way past the hour. Such an interesting matter. Premier, Can you move the motion?
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order 23, 7, and 8 in order that questions may be taken after the hour of 11 o'clock.
The motion is that standing orders are suspended in order for questions to be answered after 11, right now 11:30. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The next question.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition, elected member for Newlands, to ask the Honourable Minister of Finance and Economic Development, question number 22.
The Honourable Deputy Leader of the Opposition, member for Newlands.
Mr. Speaker, I would actually seek the leave of the House to withdraw this question, as I believe the Premier's statement earlier this week would have provided sufficient information.
I think the House will agree to withdraw the motion is that the question be withdrawn. All in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The question is withdrawn. Elected member for Newlands. Sorry, Clerk. I'm
The
trying to
elected
save time.
member for Newlands, to ask the Honourable Minister of Financial Services and Home Affairs, question number 23.
Honourable member for Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask question number 23 to the Honourable Minister for Financial Services and Home Affairs. Can the Honourable Minister provide an answer to the following question? A, now that the local retail banks have implemented the PRISM Service INC electronic clearinghouse solution, what is the expected time frame for customers of those participating banks to begin to benefit from same-day check clearing between accounts at different retail banks? And B, will the service be provided at an increased cost to the customers of the participating banks?
Honourable Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And first, I'd like to thank the elected member from Newlands for this question. As I know he is aware, and many of us, that the implementation of the automatic clearinghouse and electronic funds transfer should greatly enhance the operational efficiency of retail banks in the Cayman Islands. And as I said previously, the ministry has, and certainly I have as minister, engaged with the retail banks on these same issues, among other issues of concern to the public. So the answer: while the retail banks have engaged PRISM Service Inc. to assist with the implementation of the automatic clearinghouse, ACH, and the electronic funds transfer, EFT, in the Cayman Islands, at this time only the EFT service has been launched in a jurisdiction. The retail banks, along with PRISM, have taken a phased approach to implementation. This phased approach began with the implementation of EFT in May 2018 and is now available to customers of the retail banks. EFT allows customers to make same-day transfers to other bank accounts within the Cayman Islands. This service is anticipated to be used in lieu of the current practice of purchasing drafts to make local payments. However, it is important to note that the banks have indicated that individuals wishing to utilize the process of purchasing a draft instead of using the EFT method are still able to do so. The Ministry of Financial Services recently held meetings with all retail banks, at which time the banks indicated that it has not been determined whether customers will be charged a fee for this EFT service. However, all banks have indicated that if a fee were to be charged, it would be at a cost significantly less than the current cost of purchasing a draft. The aforementioned phased approach being undertaken by the retail banks and PRISM with regards to the implementation means that the operation of the ACH portion of the project is not anticipated to commence until the first quarter of 2019. The ACH service will allow for the automation of the check clearing process. All retail banks are currently in the process of implementing, testing, and finalizing systems to ensure a smooth implementation of the ACH system in 2019. In our discussions with the retail banks, the banks have indicated that there is currently no intention to charge customers for the service of same-day check clearing, which will be facilitated by the implementation of ACH in Q1 2019.
The member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Minister for that response. I do have a follow-up. And I'm not sure if the Minister will have this information now, but I'll ask the question. Is the Ministry aware of how the selection of the service provider was conducted? Was there any attempt made to engage local companies in providing the service?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence to see if the technical team was aware. I certainly don't have those details, but I'll see if we do. If you give me a moment, thanks. Mr. Speaker, I have been informed that as this is an initiative of the banks themselves, the Bankers Association met as a group and determined the way to proceed, as in the selection of the vendor. That is all the information that I have to date.
Honourable, the member for Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm taking from that answer that the Financial Services Ministry, or I would say even Monetary Authority, has no real oversight of this project, or are not really involved. Is that the case, that there's no monitoring of what is happening or what is developing?
Mr. Speaker, as
Minister.
I indicate, thank you. The monitoring aspect is in relation to the fees, and certainly on a quarterly basis, the Monetary Authority would report, as you would be aware, and this is something that this government introduced to be able to create greater transparency as it relates to the actual implementation. I would have to find out more information about what level of oversight, as you said, is being done. But certainly the choice of the technology itself is not something that I certainly would be involved as minister, and as far as I understand, it is not something that the ministry was involved in terms of actually determining which service provider, nor really do I believe it should be in that regard. But again, it's a question of making sure the oversight with respect to the monitoring of fees, and if what we're being told is actually going to continue, and if there's any changes in that regard, then the ministry would certainly be making any recommendations for any changes that may need to be made in order to ensure customer or consumer considerations are being accounted for.
Member for Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Why I asked that question, Mr. Speaker, is because I am concerned about the timeline for implementation. We've seen it's taken over 10 years to get to this point. We still don't have what my private member's motion last term called for, and what a lot of the customers of the banks have been calling for. And I'll try to be brief, but there is a concern because there's a sort of a hold up in terms of customers of the banks implementing e-commerce solutions, doing transactions with customers overseas and so on. And the reason why I asked the government to maybe put something in legislation mandating this to be done is because of that timeline concern I have. So I don't know if at this point the minister can indicate that they're considering that, but I think in terms of implementation, would the minister consider somehow, through whatever means available to her, getting more involved in the implementation timeline to make sure it's done at a time that's within a time frame that's acceptable to the government?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to make sure I understand the concern about the timeline and the member can clarify if I haven't quite gotten what he's saying. So are you concerned about the timeline as it relates to other financial institutions interacting with Cayman Islands financial institutions, and that the timeline is impacting the ability to do that? Or I didn't quite get the concern, and I'd be happy to take the concern back to the banks in my discussion. So I just want to make sure what exactly the concern that's being expressed and that we have a good understanding of that.
Member for Newlands.
Mr. Speaker, just to clarify, my biggest concern is the same-day check clearing. That is what everybody's been anticipating and waiting for. And when the announcement was made, a number of people were quite excited by it. But we're seeing that that is in a phase that's still yet to be implemented. So my concern is, can we somehow get involved in saying to the banks, look, we need this by this time, rather than go another 10 years waiting for it?
Well, certainly, Mr. Speaker, through you, waiting another 10 years is not an option, especially since they have given a commitment that this would be in place by Q1 2019. So I can give the member assurance that I would continue to press for that. I will, as I said, make sure that we take back the concern about possibly expediting that implementation. Again, and I'm certainly not the technology guru, so I don't want to say the specifics about what needs to happen by when in order to ensure that we have a functioning system. But from what I have been advised is that the testing, obviously we would want to make sure the interconnectivity is working before they go to full launch. So I'm assuming that that process is going to really take the time that they have outlined. However, I will take your concern back to the banks in further discussions on this and to see what can be done to try to expedite it in a way that actually doesn't create any hiccups, because of course, and the member being in the technology field, you know that sometimes if we don't work through the details in a testing manner and implement something prior to having satisfaction that it's working, that can create even more chaos, and it's certainly not an area that we want to create any level of uncertainty, and that is the operations within our financial services and in our banks. Thank you.
The member for Newlands. After that, I will give the member for Bordentown West an opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this was my final. I just want to thank the minister for offering to do that. And just to say, the reason why I'm a bit pessimistic is because it's taken so long to get to this point. And we've seen the promised deadlines slip and slip. Last term, I think I questioned this about 3 times and was given assurances it would be done within a few months, and then it slipped again. So that's why I'm a bit pessimistic. But I'd like to thank the minister for giving that commitment.
The member for Bordentown West.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I just feel as if though I just need to add something to this conversation. As simple as this may sound from the banking standpoint, I'm not being defensive of bank, it is not going to be as easy as people think it is, and I'll explain to you why just briefly. One, the technology does exist, but it comes with a cost. Just as though we send money to other banks internationally, other banks can do that locally, but now you're going to talk about doing a cost of a wire. To try to get this locally, the truth of the fact is, Mr. Speaker, contrary to what people may think, we don't have the volume of business that people think to pay for this kind of system. So,
can you?
Yeah, I'm going to put it in a, question. Sorry, I apologize. You know, so, huh? Yeah, no, well, the thing about it is, okay, sorry. Okay.
Phrase it into a
question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I wasn't planning to say nothing, but after all the back and forth, and I know the public is listening, I didn't want to, but can the minister at least agree then? From a question, yeah. Can the minister agree that this is an easy process? One, we don't have the volume of business as people may think locally between the banks. Everything amount of checks. Most of the banks that are in the US and other places have bigger clearing banks that they go through, and you're talking about hundreds of thousands of transactions literally on a daily basis, in some cases in the millions. We are a very small jurisdiction, and these solutions aren't cheap. You can go via the Cirrus or the Visa network, but it's going to cost. It'll be the same as what you pay for internationally. So if you want to give a solution or find a solution locally without the cost, it's going to take some time when you factor in that different banks have different systems and many of them don't speak to each other. I can tell you from my own shop, the system that we use was so outdated that even the modern day hackers couldn't even figure out the system to even hack into it because the code that they use is so backwards. So I just wanted to put that out there that this is not going to be something, it's not a magic bullet. Sorry.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly thank the member from Bontown West for that question. And I think the short answer is yes, I agree from what I have been told and the explanations given about the process that it is a more complex system than the public may think, and the particular issues of having a small jurisdiction and the cost and making sure that it is cost effective for the jurisdiction does add to the considerations that the banks are having to make. And certainly the steer has been to ensure that we are sensitive and mindful of the cost implications that it could be to the public to use this system. I certainly, have encouraged them to do so, but I am also mindful that to dictate a system without understanding those ramifications, the way that the banks themselves would not be a prudent way to proceed.
Last supplementary, the Leader of the Opposition.
Can the Minister offer an explanation for the fact that I may go to my own account in one bank and write a check. The money comes out of my account at that bank at the same time. I go to another bank to deposit that money. If I carry cash, I got to fill out all kind of forms to see where I got the cash from. And if I deposit that check in my own account, it still takes 3 or 4 days to clear. Where has the money gone in that period of time? Who's making use of the money in the 3 days it takes for me to get clearance on that check from my own account?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if I understand the question being to deal, and I think it's a question that may have been answered previously, certainly I think it was a question that came up about if there's any spread or who earns any interest on the spread at the time in between. From what I have been told from having the various conversations with the banks is that this really depends on the banking institution itself, and that there may be some marginal interest during the holding period. However, the explanation for the reason of the hold of the checks is not necessarily on that, the interest earned per se. The rationale for holding the checks is in many respects to prevent fraudulent transactions. And as we know, and also to ensure that the accounts have sufficient funds. So to prevent the issue of people doing the bounce checks or the kiting or whatever it's referred to in some quarters. Again, prior to the new system that we've put in place, the EFT and what is coming online, the ACH, each of the retail banking system I've been explained to is programmed to automatically hold these checks, and that those automatic clearing requires a manual override, which some banks are able to provide through the appropriate manager. But certainly the banks currently, as I said, in some cases, they will do the same-day clearing upon request because it is a manual override that they would have to implement within their own internal policies. And I hope that answers the question to the point of the explanations that we have been given thus far.
The member for Newlands, and this is the last supplementary.
Yeah, last supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
I would ask you to consider whether you do need to ask questions 24, because we have really traversed that ground.
I was planning to ask to withdraw that
Withdraw
one.
that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want the minister to say whether or not she agrees with me on this scenario. You have a small business waiting for funds to clear. They've received a check from someone. The funds are blocked for 3-4 days once they deposit it. Could even be within the same bank, as far as I'm understanding. The small business needs those funds to pay bills, to operate. They don't have wonderful cash flow, being a small business. In the meantime, the banks could potentially be earning interest on that, what you consider float, that money that's sitting in suspense until it clears. Is there not something wrong with that scenario?
As I've indicated, Mr. Speaker, the question of whether they earn interest or not is dependent on the bank, from what I understand. So I don't think I can sit here and agree that that is the case, as it has been explained to me. The concern about not having access instantly to the checks through the process that we have now until the automatic check clearing process comes in place, well, the option is the electronic transfer of funds, which is in place and which the banks are trying to encourage people to take advantage of, and that will help to avoid the concern that the member has raised, to encourage that electronic transfer of funds. And so that solution is already in place, and we're working, as I said, the banks have committed to continue the process with the ACH. As I've indicated in my previous responses supplementary, there are procedures and internal policies which will allow the banks to approve same-day clearance with the appropriate manager, but it is the way that their systems are designed now to automatically hold those checks to prevent, as I said, fraudulent transactions, which we know are real, as in it's a real concern, and in this heightened world of compliance, the banks are under a greater obligation to make sure that they don't facilitate, any sort of nefarious activity, as well as to make sure that the sufficient funds issue is considered as well. So that's my response to that, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister.
The elected member for Newlands to ask Honourable Minister of Human Resources, Immigration and Community Affairs, question number 24.
Honourable member for Newlands, I think you have agreed to withdraw the question.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I seek the leave of the House to withdraw question number 24.
The question is that question number 24 be withdrawn. All in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The question is therefore withdrawn.
Statements by honourable ministers and members of the Cabinet.
I think we do have one question. Two questions. Statements. I will say to honourable members, we do have about 15 bills left for the first and second readings. And I'm asking members to be very judicious, and if we're going to be questions on these statements, to please use questions as questions and not as statements. Clerk. Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to inform you, sir, and members of this Honourable House that I along with the Honorable Attorney General, will attend the 39th regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, which will be held in Montego Bay, Jamaica next week. On the 21st of June, I wrote to His Excellency Erwin LaRocque, Secretary General of CARICOM, to advise that as the President of the United Kingdom Overseas Territories Association's Political Council, I wish to bring to the attention of CARICOM members a most serious matter that is impacting all British overseas territories that are associate members of CARICOM. The matter that I'm referring to is that of the constitutional overreach by the United Kingdom Parliament, of which everyone in this House is aware. I can confirm that all overseas territories view the actions of the UK Parliament to legislate for the territories in area of domestic policy, which have been devolved to the territories, as a gross affront to the constitutional relationship we have with the United Kingdom. Every single overseas territories leader during the recent pre-Joint Ministerial Council meeting in London expressed a concern not only with the potential of further overreach, but some others gave past examples where this had occurred in their own territories. We were all of one voice that we each need to seek our own individual constitutional safeguards to prevent any future possibility of constitutional overreach. Mr. Speaker, we have received confirmation that the matter which I have raised has been placed on the agenda for discussion in the caucus at the CARICOM Heads of Government meeting, and that my letter to the Secretary General outlining the issue will be circulated to the heads of government and delegates and used as the paper to facilitate that discussion. I believe that a discussion at the caucus level with regards to this issue and the need for clarity in the constitutions of the Caribbean overseas territories will have the dual benefit of deepening the understanding of CARICOM leaders regarding our unique circumstances while increasing our level of engagement as associate members of CARICOM. I'm grateful to Secretary General LaRocque for agreeing that this matter be added to their caucus agenda at such a late stage, and believe that this is an indication that CARICOM also views the matter as important. Mr. Speaker, as you and members of this Honourable House are aware, there is strength in numbers. Just as members of this House are united in assuring that the rights of overseas territories citizens are respected and protected, so too can we benefit from the support of CARICOM. Mr. Speaker, as you and members of the House are aware, in March I led a delegation to Hong Kong to attend the Great Festival of Innovation. We went at the invitation of the United Kingdom as part of the Global Britain Initiative. While there, I and other ministers took the opportunity to also meet with private sector financial industry leaders, including Invest Hong Kong, to determine the level of interest that Hong Kong businesses have in the Cayman Islands. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Financial Services has attended various events in Hong Kong over the past 2 years and has seen firsthand the potential for growth from the region. Attending the Great Festival allowed for more in-depth conversations with industry members, including Maples, Walkers, DMS, and large accounting firms, as well as clients of the jurisdiction, and pointed to the fact that serious consideration is needed regarding the re-establishment of a Cayman Islands government office in Asia. As members may know, 2 previous attempts at opening a Cayman Islands government office in Hong Kong did not last. I suspect this was the case because of the challenges of this particular market and the need to be very focused on what we are actually seeking to achieve. In any event, Mr. Speaker, much time has passed and needs change. And so we believe it is time for us to explore again the possibility of an Asian presence, particularly given the increasing importance of Asian markets to financial services. In fact, Mr. Speaker, about 70% of all companies listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange are incorporated here in the Cayman Islands. I can advise this Honorable House that my government has reached out to industry, and a cross-industry working group of senior leaders has been pulled together to develop a business case and consider the challenge of establishing a successful presence in China. Initial discussions included whether we should look to Hong Kong or perhaps Shanghai on mainland China as the ideal place to locate a Cayman Islands government office. Other jurisdictions were also discussed as well, including Singapore. But in the end, it was fairly unanimous that we should start in Hong Kong. Members of that working group include the Deputy Premier, the Chief Officer in the Ministry of Tourism, Strand Borden, Alasdair Robertson, Paul Biles, Don Seymour, Conor O'Dea, Taron Jackman, Sharice Arman, and Joel Walton. We are working closely, particularly with private sector businesses who have already successfully gone through setting up shop in Hong Kong and who can offer advice to help us avoid pitfalls and unseen challenges and to make a success of this new venture. Work is now ongoing by members of the group to suggest how best to structure the office, not only to accommodate financial services, but also tourism, our shipping registry, and indeed our aircraft registry. Mr. Speaker, we envision the Cayman office in China to mirror the operations of our London office, which has operated since 1982. I personally believe we need a presence in Asia because our competitors are already there. In addition, Mr. Speaker, when we attended the Great Festival in Hong Kong, the absence of a Cayman Islands government office was very pronounced, given the number of Caymanian law and accounting firms, as well as Caymanians working in Hong Kong. Mr. Speaker, I repeat that the Asian market has become increasingly more important to our financial services business, and with the advent of financial technology, there is a huge opportunity that we will be able to grow that business from this region. Indeed, in many respects, there is likely much untapped business, not only in financial services, shipping, and aircraft registration, but also in tourism. Mr. Speaker, I will keep this Honourable House and the general public up to date and informed as we progress this office, the establishment of this office in Asia. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I have indications from the Honorable Minister of Health. The Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to update you on the status of the garbage collection in the Cayman Islands. I will begin with a summary of the most recent bulletin on the subject issued this morning by the Department of Environmental Health, known as DEH. The Department of Health assures residents of Cayman Brac that garbage collection in the vicinity of the old Public Works compound to West End, including Old Airport Road, will resume today, Friday, 29th of June. In addition, garbage pickup will also begin in all Cayman Brac communities. They are scheduled for collection today. Garbage collection on Grand Cayman will also take place as scheduled. DH apologizes to residents for the recent delays in garbage collection. A review of updates issued earlier this week for Grand Cayman shows that all trucks are currently operational and routes fully staffed. Any delays in garbage pickup were the result of a backlog carried over from the previous week. Pickup last week was impacted by downtime for garbage collection trucks in need of repair, as well as low level of employee attendance on some days due to illness and vacation. Honorable colleagues, I am convinced you will agree that today's bulletin from the department reflects the months of hard work which has gone into addressing the challenges of which we are all aware. You may also recall some of these yourselves in a statement, press release last month. Deputy Governor, Mr. Franz Manderston, noted that work remains ongoing to address human resources concerns such as absenteeism. This is being tackled through performance management and fostering increased accountability within the department. To provide support in this area, Ms. Nancy Bernard, Deputy Chief Officer in the Ministry of Health, was also temporarily seconded to the DEH. In addition, Mr. Speaker, as Mr. Manison promised, the mission critical vacancies were filled by 10 temporary hires in the role of heavy vehicle drivers, landfill attendants, solid waste drivers assistants, and a welder to assist in the repairs to the commercial containers. We have also sought to manage scheduling to avoid unsustainable overtime claims and reduce these from $100,000 per month late last year to recently just $25,000 per month. Unfortunately, our fleet of vehicles and other equipment has many pieces that are also past their prime, which comes with its own challenges. While the government has invested heavily in the fleet over recent years, unfortunately, we are still very much in catch-up mode, trying to make up for the past years where the capital investments were not being made. To this end, the department has partnered with the private sector to fill the gaps in residential collection caused when equipment failures trigger unscheduled maintenance. DEH officials stress that this takes place only when necessary. Mr. Speaker, I can say moving forward, the private sector will be a key element of ensuring that residential garbage collections are collected on time. In addition, the department collaborates with the Department of Vehicle and Equipment Services to provide daily troubleshooting, which has resulted in much quicker turnaround of repairs. Another notable benefit from this arrangement was the repair of the DOPSTAT, a machine that processes vegetation and which, when functioning, frees considerable space at the landfill. DEH and DVS are also working closely together on reviewing the fleet and identifying a replacement strategy for vehicles and equipment whose service cost now exceeds their lifetime value. This information will be invaluable in identifying in a strategic manner an investment plan for new vehicles and equipment. To help us better the plan, the garbage collection process, the DEH engineering section has also just started working on a review of the routes in Grand Cayman to try to optimize efficiency. This project aims to make the best use of resources, including vehicles and staff, and is expected to be completed in 3 months. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the people of the Cayman Islands for the patience they have continued to show during this period. As Minister responsible for health, I am extremely conscious of the understandable concern that many feel when they realize it has been somewhat longer than usual since their last garbage pickup. Although I cannot promise that these challenges will end imminently. I can assure you that we are doing everything in our power to provide reliable, consistent service, and I am confident that the continued efforts by the hard-working staff of DEH will continue to see the situation improve and normalize. Mr. Speaker, I can say that no one is more anxious than myself to see this situation improve and normalize. And to this end, I would like to urge all members of the public to like the DEH social media pages. These can be found on Facebook, DEH Cayman Islands, and on Instagram, DEH Cayman. This will ensure that you immediately see the posts that announce when and where DEH is behind schedule. On these pages, you can also find tips on ensuring that your garbage handling and packaging process is safe for you and our collectors. There is also guidance on useful services provided by the Georgetown landfill, such as the 24-hour drop-off. Another alternative is to stay tuned to the local media, which receives the daily garbage collection updates. Mr. Speaker, I can say this is something that I fought for, and we do get these reports daily so persons can know exactly what is happening and people don't have to guess anymore as to whether the schedule has been delayed or not. I would like to end by expressing lasting gratitude to the staff of the ministry, the department, and all our partner agencies who have worked so hard to get us to this point. Your efforts have helped to improve the lives of the public that you serve and are truly appreciated by the government. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also add that this government, this is something that we discuss every week in caucus. As to the way forward, you can know, Mr. Speaker, that I am actively involved, personally going to the collections depot myself and trying to see what new ideas we can come up with, trying to think outside the box. And we have definitely made some progress in this regard. Mr. Speaker, I thank you and thank the member from East End for raising this question just this week.
The member for East End.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence to ask a few short questions.
Under the standing order, short questions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the minister can tell us how many personnel shortage since is still he is still struggling with since the deputy governor made that announcement that they were going to hire the people.
But somebody was dealing with it, and that person then ought to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the main problems, as I alluded to earlier, Mr. Speaker, is the absenteeism. And we've just hired, as I mentioned earlier, 10 temporary workers to assist with the department. As we speak, in accordance with the amount of vehicles that are and equipment that are available, we are currently staffed up.
Mr. Speaker.
Member from East End.
Thank you, sir. I have some sage advice for the minister, but I could do that off camera. I wonder if those new trucks have been hired that we budgeted for November last year.
Honorable Minister.
Ordered.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask the honourable member from East End to repeat the question, please?
Certainly, Mr. Speaker.
Member for East End.
During the budget process, November, we did the full year budget, the 2-year budget. We had lengthy discussions surrounding, I think it was 2 new garbage trucks that were to be hired, to be ordered to complement the fleet. And that's in this year's budget.
Mr. Speaker,
Minister.
thank the member for the question. Well, what I will say is that there's no funds in this year's budget for additional garbage trucks. The funds that he was talking about are the garbage trucks that were to be ordered were in last year's budget.
Last supplementary. Last question, please.
Mr. Speaker, I am lost because the discussion surrounding, no, you wasn't here last year. You wasn't here the budget prior to the one we are currently in. I can assure you that, because I was here and you wasn't. You found funds in last year's budget. And this way in November this year, and the budget started in July 1st? No, Mr. Speaker, something wrong with that.
If this matter could be cleared up at this point, then fine. If not, then we have to move on.
Mr. Speaker, let's say the minister came in at the end of that 18-month budget. He had 6 months. I questioned at the time about the ordering of those trucks, i.e., that the lead time was something like 18 months. Do you remember that? And the minister's response in Finance Committee was, this is a new regime, and we will get them in less time. You did, sir. Oh. And to date, no trucks have been ordered in that financial year. So now we are still, but Mr. Speaker, I could turn that into a question.
Yes.
I see where they say they're going to take 3 months to review and the efficiencies of the routes. Why is it taking 3 months when we already know where the country is? It now moved, nor has it expanded. Number two is, what's the reason that the trucks are not being repaired in a more timely manner? Can't we find a supplier overseas that will give us credit to get those parts?
That was the last short, sorry?
Mr. Speaker,
Honourable Minister.
I do agree that there are problems in the past in terms of the repair of vehicles in a timely manner. Since then, DH and DVS, with assistance from the ministers, has a great relationship now, and the turnaround time is much quicker. In fact, all of our equipment is up in service right now. And well, we have to wait and see, you know. We can't kill it before it starts. Yeah, we'll try.
Thank you, Minister. Clark.
Personal explanations.
Sir, Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence. I guess it's a function of the level of my tiredness. But in the statement which I read about the government's intention to establish an office in Hong Kong, I listed a number of people who are involved in the process, and I omitted, to my chagrin, the Minister for Financial Services and the Chief Officer for Financial Services. In fact, the Chief Officer in Financial Services is the one who's leading the charge, so I am really embarrassed by having left that, but it's not actually written in the statement, but I should have picked it up.
Honourable Premier, at least I took it that the Minister would have been involved.
Personal explanations. There's none. Personal explanations is none. I call personal explanations. There's none. Oh. Obituary and other ceremonial speeches.
None.
Raising a matter of privileges.
None.
Government business. Bills. First readings, the Whistleblower Protection Amendment Bill 2018. It's been read first time.
The whistleblower,
Has been read the first time. You just
the
first time.
bill has been deemed to have been read the first time and is set down for the second reading.
The Public Authorities Amendment Bill 2018.
The bill has been deemed to have been read the first time and is set down for the second reading.
Second readings, the Liquor Licensing Amendment Bill 2018.
Honorable members, before the minister rises, I bring to your attention the number of business laws that we have and the amount of business that we still have left to conduct today. Please be judicious with your time. I must ask that, and I must say that we gave a lot of latitude in the last several days. Today, we will have to stick to the bill. If members digress from the bill, I will have to bring them back to the point. Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to present the bill. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of a bill entitled the Liquor Licensing Amendment Bill 2018. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I won't get into too much of the preamble as this topic has been aired in the public extensively over the last few months. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to increase the powers of the Liquor Licensing Board to permit Sunday opening of packaged licensed premises and to waive certain fees. The bill, Mr. Speaker, would also allow licenses to be granted to registered nonprofit organizations and reduce the number of and define more precisely the categories of licenses issued under the law. Mr. Speaker, over the years there have been some ambiguity and issues with several sections of the liquor licensing law. In an effort to identify and address the issues, committees were appointed to review and recommend appropriate amendments to the law. The law was amended in 2015 to address critical deficiencies and provide a more efficient licensing regime while bringing in line with the framework that supported the trade and business licensing law. Mr. Speaker, although the previous law amended resolved many of the prior issues, difficulties with the categories of licenses and the ambiguity in how the law should be applied still remained. As you may recall, Mr. Speaker, the sale of liquor on Sundays was the subject of news reports in previous months. The concerns expressed by the industry and the wider community over the handling of Sunday alcohol sales influenced the changes and prompted my ministry, in consultation with the Liquor Licensing Board, to identify the major areas of concern and propose amendments that would address those concerns. Mr. Speaker, in an effort to consult with all persons that these amendments would have an impact on, I met with the Cayman Islands Tourism Association, the Cayman Ministers Association, and the National Drug Council, along with stakeholders in the industry. Mr. Speaker, the feedback and concerns were expressed by all parties were considered. And Mr. Speaker, the proposed bill is intended to address the urgent matters only. A much more comprehensive review, including feedback from the National Drug Council and the Cayman Ministers Association, the Cayman Islands Tourism Association, and other stakeholders will take a closer look at the rules around the training of bar staff and the advertising of alcohol, as well as potentially combining the music and dancing law, control law and the liquor licensing law is planned for the longer term. Mr. Speaker, I'll run through the clauses of the bill. Clause 2, Mr. Speaker, seeks to amend the definitions of license and permitted hours in Section 2 of the law in consequence of amendments made by clauses 7 and 8 of the bill. The clause also seeks to add a new definition of mobile bar. The amendment to the definition of license is a direct result of the deletion of the wine and beer license category in Clause 7, which reduces the category of licenses from 8 to 7. Further explanation on this amendment will be addressed under Clause 7. The amendment to the definition of permitted hours is a result of the amendment to Clause 8, which would determine the hours covered by an extension granted by the board. Mr. Speaker, while the current law speaks to mobile bars, there is no definition of mobile bars in the law. As this is a growing sector in the industry, this amendment is needed in order to properly identify mobile bars and the use thereof, to avoid any breaches and to comply with the law. Clause 3, Mr. Speaker, seeks to insert new Section 4A into the law, which provides for the Cabinet to give policy direction to the board in the performance of its functions and requires the board to give effect to such policy directions. Mr. Speaker, as Minister with responsibility for several boards, I undertook to ensure that the board under this law had a clear understanding of its role and responsibility. I felt it important that all members were provided with the necessary tools and underwent the necessary training to run an efficient board. The law did not make it clear that policy decisions are issued by Cabinet, as it is in similar laws under the ministry. This particular clause allows for Cabinet to provide guidance and policy direction to the board whenever it is deemed necessary. Mr. Speaker, as you may be aware, there have been a number of licensees expressing their concerns with the ambiguity with several sections of the law. The ministry has also had representation from the board expressing concerns with certain aspects of the law which needed to be amended in an effort to enable the board to make better, more informed decisions within the purview of the law. Mr. Speaker, Clause 4 seeks to amend Section 7 by inserting a new subsection requiring the board, before it issues a package license and a retail license in respect of the same premises, to be satisfied that there is a clear demarcation between the areas used within the premises for the dispensing of intoxicating liquor under each license, and that licensees are able to control each area. Mr. Speaker, as you and this Honorable House may recall, the issue of package license and certain decisions that had been taken by the previous board were debated in the media with regards to a well-known establishment. Upon assuming responsibility of this particular board, I gave the directive to review the particular section of the law that related to the issue of multiple licenses, namely retail and package, to ensure that any ambiguities in approving such licenses were rectified. Currently, holding both a retail and a package license at the same location is contradictory to the law, and it is proven difficult for enforcement personnel to monitor and regulate, sir. Mr. Speaker, it is envisioned that this amendment will address the concerns when issuing the different categories of licenses. Clause 5, Mr. Speaker, seeks to amend Section 8 to allow the board to grant licenses to nonprofit organizations that are registered under the Nonprofit Organization Law of 2017. This clause also seeks to recognize nonprofit organizations and not only Section 80 companies as in the existing law, therefore bringing the law current. Clause 6, Mr. Speaker, seeks to amend Section 9 by deleting the requirements for licensed premises to have plainly marked and lighted exits and an adequate fire extinguishing system, since Section 9 already provides that the board, before granting a license, shall have regard to representations concerning the suitability of the premises made by the chief fire officer. The clause also deletes the reference to representations made by the chief medical officer, as these are no longer necessary since smoking is prohibited inside the licensed premises. Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to providing support to the Cayman people and its businesses. I feel that while these are minor amendments to address urgent matters, I am keeping in line with our commitment by streamlining processes and eliminating unnecessary duplications in the licensing process. As previously stated, Mr. Speaker, I have given directives for a full review of this law with all the relevant stakeholders to address any other duplications and unnecessary bureaucracy that may exist. Mr. Speaker, Clause 7 seeks to amend Section 10(1) to delete wine and beer licenses, reducing the number of categories of licenses from 8 to 7. Mr. Speaker, this particular clause will streamline the process by removing a category of license that is not frequently issued. Further, this category of license limits the licensee to the sale of only beer and wine, whereas a retail license paying the same fee is allowed to dispose of all types of alcoholic beverages. This clause also seeks to amend the terms of retail licenses, temporary licenses, and restaurant licenses in Section 10 as follows, Mr. Speaker. A retail license is restricted to the disposal of intoxicating liquor for consumption on the premises of a bar, mobile bar, nightclub, seagoing vessel, or of an establishment at which tasting events of wine or other intoxicating liquors are held. A temporary license, Mr. Speaker, is specified as having a maximum period of validity of 90 days. As it is presently written in the law, Mr. Speaker, licenses are issued to both businesses as well as the individuals. There have been instances where licenses were issued to individuals of particular businesses, who then departed the business, leaving the business without a license and in violation of the law. Mr. Speaker, this amendment will allow for business continuity in the event of such occurrences, and the 90-day time frame will coincide with the 90 days between quarterly meetings to ensure that the business is operational and in compliance with the law. This will allow applicants to submit their applications for approval at the next quarterly meeting. A restaurant license, Mr. Speaker, is broadened to permit the disposal of liquor to any person if it is consumed on the premises and food is served on the premises. Currently, Mr. Speaker, the law stipulates that one must purchase and consume food in order to consume alcoholic beverages at a restaurant. This particular amendment will rectify this issue. Clause 7 also seeks to amend Section 10, Mr. Speaker, to permit Cabinet to prescribe fees for an extension granted by the chairman under Section 11.3 or for permission given by the board under Section 11.6. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the clause amends Section 10 to permit the board to waive fees for temporary or occasional license for an event that is part of a national festival, for example, the Pirates Week Festival. Mr. Speaker, Clause 8 seeks to amend Section 11 to empower the board to permit licensed premises covered by a package license to sell liquor on Sundays during such hours as the board may determine. Mr. Speaker, this amendment comes as a result of the direct consultation with the board to allow package license holders to sell alcoholic beverages on Sunday to be consumed off premises with the board's discretion of permitted hours. These hours are being 1 p.m. to 7 p.m., Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the amendments, which will allow package licenses to sell on Sundays for consumption off premises, it is the social responsibility of the board to consider factors that are in the best interest of the public, including, but not limited to, the potential impact of the premises on the impact of the premises on antisocial activities in the locality and management strategies to minimize impact, and potential impact of premises on vandalism, litter, and criminal acts. The clause, Mr. Speaker, also makes minor amendments to subsection 1 and 8 in consequence of the elimination of wine and beer licenses by clause 6. Mr. Speaker, this bill is an effort in the short term to close the gate on what one could explain as a free-for-all at the moment, and clearly define the licenses and give the board better control and allow for better enforcement of the licensees. As I said earlier, we will be carrying out a comprehensive review for a modern bill that will include items such as training for those serving in the liquor business, in the restaurants and the bars. Also, in anticipation of a national ID or an electronic ID program, we will place responsibilities on licensees to ensure that they are dispensing of the alcohol in a responsible manner within the law, and they will require training for such. Mr. Speaker, there have been some recommendations that have arisen during the 21-day consultation period, and these, Mr. Speaker, will be addressed at the committee stage amendments. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the team in the ministry for the work they've put into this, and also the board for their cooperation and the splendid job they've done in managing the situation over the last few months. I'd like to personally thank the chairman, Mr. Noel Williams, for the splendid job he has done, and for what could have really carried on for a very embarrassing time for the government and for the board. The chairman has shown real leadership in containing the situation and returning stability and respect for the board. So, Mr. Speaker, that concludes my presentation on the bill, and I therefore commend the Liquor License Amendment Bill 2018 to the Honorable House for passage.
Does any other member wish to speak? The member from East End.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a short contribution to the bill before us, the Liquor License Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, I hear the minister, I think at least he said that he is having a comprehensive review to bring a modern bill at least 4 times. I guess repetition bears emphasis. Mr. Speaker, this bill is 2 years old. This law is 2 years old. Mr. Speaker, I knew there was something wrong with it then. But time moves on. And I applaud the minister for coming up with a more liberal approach to this bill, to the law. Because I'm quite liberal in my approach with these types of things. Whilst respecting the conservative side of life. Like me, the people of Newlands wasn't wrong in their final result. There's no place in here for that kind of thing. Every bill, every law that was amended, repealed, in 1 year is almost now being comprehensively reviewed. Mr. Speaker, I shall wait until the good minister brings the other one, the comprehensive one, and then I shall have further comments to bid all those hitherto goodbye.
You can be short. How much? How much? We're going to take this suspension at this time. We would come back at 2. At 2 o'clock.